New Orleans Saints big ticket defensive end Chase Young appears to be on track to miss his fourth game of the season, and frustration is mounting. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, a big game from Alvin Kamara is absolutely necessary for the New Orleans Saints to compete in Buffalo. The Saints defense might need to deploy a little bit more man coverage based on how good Josh Allen has been throughout the season. And we're going to kick everything off with some injury updates, including Chase Young, who looks to be on track to miss his fourth consecutive game, which has got everybody asking, why didn't they put him on injured reserve? We'll get through all of that and more on today's episode. We appreciate you very much, whether it's your first time or your next time being here with us this time, making us your first listen, and being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For the second day in a row, Wednesday and Thursday now, New Orleans Saints defensive end Chase Young has not participated in practice, and frustration amongst the fan base is absolutely starting to grow. And honestly, I don't blame anybody. It's a frustrating situation. And look, the Saints are going to play this very patiently. They're not going to get frustrated. My understanding is that Chase Young is frustrated. People are frustrated for Chase Young in terms of he wants to be out on the field. The Saints want him out on the field, but I think a lot of people are going to look at this from a couple different angles. First of which, you give the guy a big contract after playing a very healthy season, and now all of a sudden he's missing 4 games with what was estimated to be a short-term calf strain. And we're now finally teetering on the definition of short term. What exactly is it? Folks were reacting quickly to a second week, but that's still short term. Third week, I'd still call short term. But once you surpass the 4 games of what would be short term injured reserve, I understand why the questions are there and where the questions are coming from. This is a New Orleans Saints team that's one of the worst in the NFL when it comes to generating pressure. That's simply a fact. I'm just looking at the percentages. And the pressure percentages, according to our friends over at True Media, they're 31 out of 32 just in terms of pressure percentage. Now, they got to the quarterback a lot over the course of the first 2 games, didn't in the third game up against Seattle. We'll see what happens here up against the Buffalo Bills. But you look at where the Saints are struggling. They've struggled a couple times on holding off third and longs. What would help there? Pressure. They struggled a little bit on sort of mixed down moments as well, particularly when dropping back to pass. What would help there? Pressure. There's a lot of different ways that this would absolutely help. And we can see it. It's all in the numbers that Chase Young helps your pass rush. It was a 7% difference when he was on the field versus when he was off the field last year in pressure percentage. It was a multi-percentage difference in sack percentage as well. 29 of the 39 sacks that the team had. Actually, no, it was 31 of the 39 sacks that the team had last year. All happened with Chase Young on the field, even if they weren't by Chase Young himself. Having Chase Young on the field creates somebody that offenses have to pay attention to, and that opens up opportunities for other players. There's a value to having him on the field, and the fact that he hasn't been able to be out on the field just yet is somewhat of a surprise, right? We were talking about how it wasn't long-term and that it was week to week, and certainly it has been week to week. There's been no doubt about that. And that's what Kellen Moore said. Kellen Moore never said short-term, but Chase Young vehemently disagreed with the idea that it was long-term, but, I guess the definition of long-term is to be debated. So now that he's about to miss, potentially, we assume, his 4th game, and listen, I'm making a leap of logic here, right? I'm making a logical leap here that he's probably not going to be available for Sunday's game. Even if he was, it would probably be to a lesser extent. He hasn't practiced in 3 weeks because he got hurt during the first practice of the year. It was an in-practice injury. And so is he going to practice once today and then go out there on Sunday and be a difference maker? I don't know. Maybe he could be. Maybe he's that good. But that's a tall task and that's a big ask, right? Those are 2 things that we can agree upon. You have another elevation still for Fadil Diggs. Would not be surprised to see him up, Chase Young down, and then trying to get him back for that Giants game, going up against a young quarterback now in Jackson Dart. I would have rather seen the Saints go up against Russell Wilson, if I'm being entirely honest, because I didn't believe in Russell Wilson at all. But in any case, that could be the game that he ends up making the return. But who knows? We'll see. I thought maybe this would be the week. So we'll see where things go. So why not put him on injured reserve if he's going to miss 4 games? Well, there are actually some reasons to not put him on injured reserve. I'll give you the typical coach reason when you ask about questions like that is going to be that there's a limited number of return spots. I've never seen an NFL team run out of return spots. I've never seen it happen here. And so, sure, there are limited return spots, but are you really going to use all of them? I doubt it. And you don't have to save any for the postseason because 0-3, but it is a reason that a lot of teams don't put players on injured reserve designated to return because you only get so many of those spots. And so you've already got guys like Barry Wesley and John Ridgway that are already taking up 2 of those spots. And then there are other players that could potentially end up going there as well. I did see some people say, well, why use a spot for Hunter Deckers, who went on the practice squad IR, instead of using it for Chase Young? I don't think those 2 pull from the same pool. And I doubt you're going to return Hunter Deckers to practice squad or anything like that. I don't think you're going to use one of those return spots. You're just putting him on injured reserve. And so we'll see where things go there. But here are a couple of real other big reasons to not that the limited return spots isn't real, but there are other real reasons as well out there for why you don't put a player on injured reserve. Number one is that clearly they thought he was going to be back sooner, right? They wanted to leave the door open for it to maybe be a 2-week injury, which was kind of, as I understand, the initial understanding. But then it turned into a 3-week thing, and now it might turn into a 4-week thing. And so you knew that there was a range in terms of the timeline, in terms of when he would be able to be back. And now it has pushed beyond the best case scenario, has pushed beyond the expectation. So for me, that's the biggest concern. The biggest concern is not that they did not use an injured reserve spot. I'll tell you why in a moment. The biggest concern for me is that whatever the injury is clearly not, has not allowed the Saints to operate on a best case scenario type of timeline, because otherwise you would put him on injured reserve if you think he was going to miss 4 games. So clearly they didn't think he was going to miss 4 games. And so where's the issue there? Is that a decision issue or is that a recovery issue? One of those 2 things might be true, and that is concerning. Both those 2 things might not be true, and then there might not be a reason for concern, but typically these serve as some kind of a warning sign in terms of like, oh, something didn't necessarily go the way that it was planned. The other reason why it doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't really matter if you put a player on injury, if you put him on injured reserve in particular, because what are you going to use that spot for? What are you going to do? Probably bring in another guy that's just going to be inactive on game day anyway. So if that's the case, you just might as well let Chase Young be one of your inactive guys. You have the standard elevations from your practice squad, so it's not like you're missing an opportunity to get Fadil Diggs on the field. He's been on the field through all 3 games so far this season, first of which because he was signed up to the active roster, the other 2 times because he was elevated. So the idea of bringing in and using that spot, like there's going to be some player somehow that you're going to sign that's going to help you, that's just not realistic. That's not going to be the case. But I'll tell you where some of my concerns lie really coming out of this. I don't care about the injured reserve side of it, but I do care very much in terms of evaluating this team from whether or not they're getting better at managing injuries. They are one of the top teams in the NFL with the most players in injured reserve, as well as physically unable to perform. These are just numbers, not opinion. These are just numbers. 2 in-practice injuries that have cost games, and it was an in-practice injury now that could stand to cost Chase Young his 4th game. Devon Vele also missed last week with an in-practice injury. He looks like he might be good to go this week, however, and then already 2 season-ending injuries coming out of the first 2 weeks of the season. So managing injuries still very much a task for this New Orleans Saints, and right now probably none more a source of frustration for Saints fans, a source of frustration, I'm sure, for the player himself than Chase Young right now and the situation around him. Not Chase Young himself, but the situation around this injury. So we'll see where things go, but hopefully the Saints are able to get him back out on the field next week. Coming up next, the New Orleans Saints may need to shift to a little bit more man coverage if they're going to try to stand up to Buffalo Bills quarterback Josh Allen. We got that coming up for you next. So continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Square, where your favorite neighborhood restaurants run. Look, there are certain businesses out there that truly make the neighborhood feel like home, whether it's a local sports bar that's packed on game day, maybe that coffee shop that already knows your order as you walk in, or the corner deli that's been serving its community for decades. These are the places that bring people together. If you're going to be headed to Buffalo, Ted's Hot Dogs is number one on the list there, as well as a couple of other wing spots that all use Square. Here in New Orleans, how about Theo's was named one of the best places to get pizza here very recently in New Orleans, here in town. So absolutely great places for you to go and check out that all use Square, because Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood restaurants and neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more. But before you do, go and support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy that you did. Square, see you in the neighborhood. Today's episode is brought to you by friends over at DoorDash, and it's almost the weekend. That means that it's time to crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash, where you can win every Saturday with DoorDash streaks, winning more every time that you order. This week's player that delivered, where there weren't a lot of players delivering for the New Orleans Saints, was rookie cornerback Quincy Riley. Got his first exposure in the NFL as a defensive player, covered well, defended the run well, and even forced a turnover, punching a ball out in the run game. Quincy Riley got an opportunity, he delivered, and now he's sure to get more opportunities to impact the game as the season rolls along. So just like Quincy Riley delivered for the New Orleans Saints, DoorDash delivers on Saturdays with DoorDash streaks. For every Saturday that you order, you'll stack up all season and save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. So order every Saturday, keep the streak alive, and fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply, promo period through November 18th. All right, family, we knew the New Orleans Saints were going to turn into more of a zone-heavy team under Brandon Staley, but for this week, they may need to consider a little bit more man coverage, certainly more than they played last week, because Josh Allen is fantastic against zone coverage. Let's be honest, Josh Allen is fantastic, period. But this is something that the New Orleans Saints should probably consider going into this matchup, just how good he's been up against the zone defenses. So for New Orleans last week, according to Next Gen Stats, the Saints played 90.5% of their defensive snaps in zone. Now, this makes sense going up against that Shanahan-esque offense of Seattle's, because if you go into man coverage, all these crossers in the middle of the field, all these other things. I know Clint Kubiak didn't do that a ton here in New Orleans, unfortunately, but he's certainly been doing it a lot over in Seattle. And so that would have put the Saints at a bit of a disadvantage. And so because of that, it needed to be a lot of passing off players through zones, communicating well. And then, as we know, and as Lance Moore mentioned during our Saints Squad show on Wednesday, Ross is how calendars work, on Wednesday, he mentioned that all zone coverage turns into man coverage eventually, and that's very true, especially when you're not getting the pass rush that you need to help get the ball out quickly. But for New Orleans, this has been a trend. They hovered over 75%, according to our friends over at True Media, in zone coverage in week 1. They were at nearly 80% in week 2, and then they were at or around 90% in week 3. Next Gen Stats has them at 90.5. True Media has them a little bit lower. These things always vary depending upon which place you're looking at. But in any case, it's a lot more zone coverage than we're used to seeing here in New Orleans, used to that Dennis Allen defense of press man on the outside. And look, the Saints still have press man talent. Kool-Aid McKinstry was drafted to be a press man corner. Alante Taylor is a physical press man coverage player. Yadam's a little bit more versatile. Riley's a little bit more versatile too. And I think all of those players have some level of versatility to them, but like a couple of those guys, they're trading cards. What is that? Calling cards, trading cards. Anybody got any Yu-Gi-Oh cards you want to send over to me? Or Pokemon cards? I'm fine with that too. But McKinstry and Taylor, like those guys are like really good, physical press man cover corners. And so, that's something that this team just kind of has to navigate right now in terms of, change of scheme, but also helping the players fit into that scheme, so on and so forth. That's all going to be a thing. But for New Orleans going into this one, getting away from or getting into some more man coverage situations, it doesn't mean that you have to play 50% of your defense in man, but if you're maybe closer to 30 or 40% and you're playing less zone than you've played so far this season, it might work out a little bit for you. A couple of reasons why. Josh Allen has been awesome. Against zone coverage. Threw for 495 of his 755 passing yards so far this season against zone coverage. It's nearly 66% of his passing yards. He's completed 74.5%. That's number 6 in the NFL against zone of his passes so far this season against those zone coverages, and he averages 7.2 yards per attempt, which is over the NFL average. This is what Josh Allen does, and this is what he's done so far this season. And so his ability to be able to hold on to the football, to move, to scramble, to the threat of him running, maybe the zone coverage certainly helps with that because eyes are to the backfield. However, if you're not getting to him, if you're not able to get him down when you do get to him, and he's a very hard quarterback to get to the ground at that size and strength and all the things that he has going his way, it's just going to give that defense more and more time that they have to cover. And eventually that zone coverage turns into man coverage. But at some point, you're going to find those spots in the zone. You're going to get into those scramble drill situations, something that the Saints offense has been working on a ton over the course of this practice week. So at least the defense is getting to go up against that a little bit. But for New Orleans, like, this is going to be a big part of the test going up against the Buffalo Bills offense, is that what their identity is on defense in terms of coverage is where Josh Allen performs incredibly well. And so how do you defend that? You're going to have to mix in some more man coverage. You're going to have to find those situations. And of course, not starting with your backs pinned to the end zone like you did up against San Francisco certainly helps a lot too, right? Like, there's other things that factor into this, being able to actually utilize the field, all of that, like that obviously makes a difference too. But for New Orleans, who have played 45.4% of their coverage so far in cover 3, over 15% in cover 4, over 12% in cover 6, this is what they do. They live in zone coverages right now. It's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that it doesn't work. It's just maybe not the greatest for this matchup. And the Saints right now are number 7 in the NFL in zone coverage percentage, 86.2%. So very heavily relying on that. Doesn't mean that you have to completely change your identity just for the sake of 1 week. That's never going to go well for you. But it does mean that maybe you start to mix in some of those other looks and see if you can create some confusion there, create some opportunities there for your defense to be able to go out there and make some plays. The other thing that you're going to be looking at, of course, is going to be the Saints in the run game. They've done a pretty good job there. Like, just looking at the tape and watching the play flow and the way that everything has been intentional and in place. The defensive line, the way that they move, the way that the linebackers fill in those gaps over the top, and the way that those secondary players fill in those gaps over the top. Everything has worked super well. The biggest thing that's going to be a big factor for me, how many times can you say big, Ross? But the thing that's going to be a sizable factor for me is going to be James Cook's ability to be able to pick a different lane. When you're doing that zone run offense, you're trying to create that crease in the middle, but you've also got a crease outside the tackle that you can bounce to. And then you also have that backdoor cutback that you can also utilize. And so James Cook is one of the best in the NFL at taking advantage of whichever option is there for him. He can get downhill quickly. He can get north and south quickly. He can get around the corner quickly, follow the play flow, but he also has the athleticism and the wherewithal to know when it's okay to reverse field and cut back and go and pick up some chunk plays. He's done a great job of that. That's it for me. Those two things are what I'm watching for the Saints defense, is trying to measure up to those two big tests and generate pressure. That's kind of it. I'm not expecting anything fancy from New Orleans here. I just want to know, can they hold up as best they can in coverage? Can they limit the passing or the rushing game, knowing what it is that James Cook does well? And can they generate pressure? Very, very simple, very basic stuff for the New Orleans Saints going into 2020, or going into week 4, Ross, hello, week 4, in a game where they're going to be outmatched. So we'll see where things head next. It's for us heading up next. We're going to be taking a look at the New Orleans Saints offense, which should absolutely run through Alvin Kamara all game long. We got that coming for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by friends over at Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat every single one of the details, and Mazda brings that same level of intention and attention to detail when it comes to how they craft every model, everything from the metallic accents to the available Nappa leather upholstery, even the all-wheel drive that's standard to every crossover SUV, so you can drive with confidence through almost any season. You can also make everyday drives feel like anything but From the smooth handling to the intuitive controls, Mazda has everything that you need. Just like the players that you know and love, they sweat every single detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints are going to need a big game out of Alvin Kamara in Buffalo if they want any chance to compete against one of the NFL's elite. We appreciate you very much for being here with us. Don't forget, you can catch us every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. You can also get some additional content from us as well over with our Insider program, which you can join by texting Who Dat to 504-285-7473 or clicking the link in the description to get started there as well. The New Orleans Saints are going to need a big game from Alvin Kamara, and they could get it. The Buffalo Bills don't have a lot of vulnerabilities when it comes to their team, but the biggest is the fact that they are the dead last, bottom-ranked run defense in the NFL. They're the number 2 passing defense in the league, but they are number 32 when it comes to yards surrendered, yards per carry, so on and so forth. They have been moved off the line of scrimmage. They have been not very physical at the line of scrimmage. They don't win very much in the run game. So this New Orleans Saints offensive line, which, by the way, is finally looking like it's going to have all 5 of its intended starting 5 out on the field this week. Trevor Penning practiced in full both Wednesday and Thursday. Taliesin Fuanga was limited on Wednesday, but then upgraded to full on Thursday. So we should see the starting lineup as it was intended, with Kelvin Banks Jr. at left tackle, Trevor Penning at left guard, Eric McCoy at center, Cesar Ruiz at right guard, and Taliesin Fuanga at right tackle. And so if the New Orleans Saints are going to be able to do anything, this is the game in the run game. This is the game that they need to be able to get it done. You're going up against the league's worst rushing defense, and you have your starting 5 on the field and on the line. That is a huge moment for the New Orleans Saints, and they'll need to make good on it when it comes to Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara is averaging just 16 carries per game right now, and the Saints rank 18th in total rushing yards. Not bad. Not bad when it comes to that, but you'd like to take some pressure off of Spencer Rattler. The young quarterback is averaging nearly 40 passes per game so far. 46 the first week, 34 the second week, and 39 the third week. You'd love to see that number tick down and Alvin Kamara's usage tick up, even if it's just north of 20. Getting him an extra 6 carries or so could be all the difference in terms of a 100-yard rushing day and not a 100-yard rushing day. And so for New Orleans, that's going to be a big thing. Alvin Kamara has faced some of the most light boxes in the NFL, according to our friends over at Next Gen Stats. Because of that, you certainly look at this offensive line and go, wow, you're still only allowing 0.71 yards before contact despite that. But getting everybody back and healthy and getting a guy like Trevor Penning who's aggressive, has an aggressive play style, who's a bulldozer, who's very physical, all those pieces, that would certainly help to get things going. So look for the Saints to try to be at least a little bit better when it comes to that. Alvin Kamara has faced the most light boxes in the NFL. I don't think you're going to see, and that means 6 or more in the box, like close to the line of scrimmage, basically. So your defensive lineman and a couple of linebackers versus your defensive lineman and 3 linebackers, or your defensive lineman and 2 linebackers in a slot corner or a safety or something like that. And the Bills don't go light very often, but when they do, they're susceptible. So we'll see how New Orleans ends up being able to maximize what they could potentially be looking to get from Alvin Kamara in this game. Finally, we'll take a quick look at Spencer Rattler. Spencer Rattler has been getting a lot of grief about his yards per attempt so far this year. People wondering if the play calling is there for him. And I'm here to try to set the record straight a little bit. Play calling is absolutely there. And Spencer Rattler is not trying to push the ball down the field. There's no lack of effort or lack of want in this. It's just that the connections aren't there yet, which isn't surprising with the new offense and everybody trying to calibrate together. Here's a couple of numbers for you. While Spencer Rattler is getting the ball out the second fastest of any quarterback in the NFL with at least 50 passing attempts, it's 30 quarterbacks, by the way, at 2.49 seconds, he's still pushing the ball down the field. And we can evidence that with numbers. Throws of 25 or more air yards, 6 of those so far here this season. That's tied for number 11 in the NFL. The issue, 1 of 6 on those passes for just 39 passing yards. So it's not that the attempts aren't there, it's that the connections aren't there. Let's back it up a little bit. How about 20 air yards? Well, 14 of those passes for Spencer Rattler. That's tied for number 6 in the NFL, so nearly top 5 there. But the issue, completed only 3 of those 14 attempts so far on the season. Spencer Rattler is one of only 4 quarterbacks in the NFL that have 10 passing attempts of 20 or more yards downfield, but less than 100 passing yards. He has 80. That makes him number 4 that makes him 4th lowest in the league. That's just ahead of Joe Flacco with 51. That's well ahead of Michael Penix Jr. with just, hold your breath on this one, 21 on 11 targets downfield and having completed only 1 of those. And then Trevor Lawrence with only 23 yards, having completed 1 of 10 of his 20 or more air yard attempts. Now, I'm not here to throw any other quarterbacks under the bus here, but it just goes to show that there are some stories to be told about how this NFL season is going with the deep ball in certain areas. But New Orleans definitely needs to start connecting on these. Expect them to be a little bit more aggressive here, because why not be? You're going up against a team that you know you're completely outmatched against. And so just go out there and be aggressive. No need to play it safe in a game like this. And so finding ways to be able to go out there and get that stuff done could be a big part of what makes New Orleans look good against Buffalo, or what continues the concern from last week. Remember, the Saints don't have to win. I'm not expecting a win over in Buffalo, but just looking like they belong on the same football field as an NFL team is an improvement from last week. All right, if you want the latest heading into the weekend on everything going on around the New Orleans Saints, make sure you join that insider program so you can get all of those directly to your phone as a text message, keeping you updated with everything going on. Otherwise, I'll see you after Sunday's game. We appreciate you very much, as always, making us a party day part of your routine. For saying yes to me and the show. If you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.